Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I would like to talk about Anita Sarkeesian, and I'd like to try to do so carefully because there's a lot of videos out there. She's a controversial figure, and so there's a lot of videos that exist to try to specifically debunk Anita, or to paint her in some kind of particular light, or persuade you that she's great, or that she's terrible. It's a very one-sided debate depending on usually who you're looking at. And like I've mentioned before, when the feminism thing was really on the rise, like during the middle of Gamergate, like I was seeing a whole bunch of stuff pop up. And eventually I just got emotionally exhausted with it, and I quit clicking on the links. I quit checking that stuff out, and eventually the search algorithms realized that I wasn't looking at it anymore. And it cut me off. Like, it quit sending me like news stories about these things. It quit telling me to like watch videos, and so from my perspective, it feels like a lot of the gender politics have died down, and it's not really a thing so much anymore. I am told by other people that this is not the case. Apparently, if you continue to click on those videos and you're still inundated and all that stuff, like if you're following people on Tumblr who are really into that, the gender politics, then you're still seeing it a lot. But for me, it feels like it's blown over. And it's a thing, though, that I've thought a lot about, like Anita Sarkeesian, in a very analytical kind of way, not in like this is everyone needs to know the truth sort of way, or everyone needs to get on some kind of thing. But just like the way that she got popular, like the timing and the things that she kind of did, and the situation that she's in now, is all kind of fascinating to me. And the way that politics evolved. I mean, like she got on the Colbert Report, and I remember like just all the different opinions about that, like all the things that people felt about Anita Sarkeesian being on the Colbert Report. And I remember watching it and just watching the way that they handled it, and thinking to myself about like how it was really the only way it could have been handled. Like, for everything that everybody said, there was only one way that Stephen Colbert could have actually handled Anita Sarkeesian being on the Colbert Report. And what they did was the logical, straightforward way that probably I would have handled it if you told me to bring Sarkeesian on my show. The personal time, I guess. If I had to do a personal time with Anita Sarkeesian, I probably would have just been like, yeah, tell me what you think. And then I would ask, like, he had that one jab in there where he was like, and this was like the only punch that he threw. He just goes, do you think that video games make people violent? And she goes, no. And he goes, all right, so how come they make people misogynistic? And she was flabbergasted. And little moments like that, like throughout the time that Anita was really on the rise, you would see all these people who would get up there. And for context, if you didn't follow any of this, Anita Sarkeesian, she's a gender activist on the internet. She was originally her background is kind of weird. Before she got to be an activist on the internet, she was doing this thing with like calligraphy courses, where it was kind of a con artist sort of thing, where she would teach people how to write in such a way that if you handwrote a letter to a woman, she would fall in love with you, or this is what they advertised. She was working with somebody, and a lot of people look at this and they say, well, see, that's proof that Anita Sarkeesian is a con artist. But that's not necessarily fair to her. Because although that's a little bit shady, you know, you have stories of people turning over new leaves all the time. They find a new ideology. They get a little sick of just like doing this kind of thing for money, and maybe they find a cause, and so on and so forth. And Anita certainly found a cause. Personally, I don't think that she's like a calculating, malicious person. Neither her nor her boyfriend also gets a lot of flack because they think of him as like the ringleader for the whole thing. I don't know about that at all. His name Ian something or other. He's got a Twitter too. They're both a little wacky. They tweet all the time. From the official one, less. Her boyfriend tweets like really weird stuff from time to time. But they don't seem like they're really that calculating of individuals to me. But I'll get to that because like I say, the whole thing is sort of fascinating. What I kind of like to do is go back though and explain like my first encounters with the feminist movement as kind of we got to see it today. This sort of new wave feminism. For a while I didn't know what to call it. Like a lot of people insisted that it was third wave feminism, but I think third wave feminism was when people were starting to come out and say like, listen, like sexuality is great, sexuality is fine. You know, I can be naked if I want. I could be naked all day, and that would be fair. And I could kind of get behind that. Like, yeah, sure, women should be sexually liberated. I feel like if a woman, I mean, that makes it that much easier to communicate and for the two of you to kind of get along with things. Like, I think that being open about that sort of thing is important. and there are a lot of European cultures that are far more open than we are in the States. We're very skittish about sex. So I think that's a revolution that, has some validity. But the feminism that kind of came out around like 2015, or that was really big, it was a mishmash of a lot of different things. It wasn't a really unified thing. It was weird. It was kind of like a, I don't know, just a wave. It wasn't third wave. I guess it was like fourth. We wouldn't even call it fourth wave, because what it seemed like people were doing is they were picking and choosing parts of the ideology that resonated with them, and then sharing that on social media, and then the stuff that was most controversial would get reblogged, because, people would disagree with it and they would reblog, and then people would agree with it and they would reblog. And it just kind of got big that way. So the most controversial factors of the ideologies would always get big, and that would always be what people would most associate stuff with. And so you get these very polar approaches to the whole thing. Like I've talked about with politics right now. Like we're seeing that in the U.S. Political system as well, where people are getting further right than they've ever been, and further left than they've ever been, for the similar reason. Like you see something that somebody says, like the Democrats say, like this, they make this very black and white statement, and it's controversial. So, if the left said it, then the right reblogs it, and they say, look at how terrible this is. They're trying to take away our rights to, happiness and everything. And then the left will reblog and say, like, oh, like this is the most important thing ever. Like, we need to defend ourselves from such and such problem, da-da-da-da. And it just gets to be this very black and white thing, and the two people feel like they can't see eye to eye. And my very first experience, though, with the feminist stuff actually came from a friend, or a former friend. I haven't talked to them since this, actually. But a former friend who went to college and got a degree in women's studies, which is essentially feminism. And I have some foreign friends that I tell them about that. Like, I'm like, yeah, like you can essentially get a degree in feminism here in the States. And they're shocked. They're like, really? Well, that would explain some things. And I say, it does actually, if you think about it. Back when I was in college, I remember I had an English book that had a bunch of different essays in it. And this is before the thing with my friend. I'm sorry, I keep backtracking just a little bit further. But I had an English book, and in it there were a bunch of different essays. And there was a series of essays written by feminist thinkers. For whatever reason, this book had it. And this wasn't part of the curriculum, but I remember I used to just read through that book, and I would read like essays that people wrote between classes. And I got to the feminist section of the book. And I remember it being kind of fascinating. Not because it struck me as like an eye-opening kind of ideology, but because it was mostly second-wave feminists. And if you're familiar with that, that's like Andrea Dworkin and people like that. Women who believed that whenever a man has sex, it is rape. Things like that. Like Andrea Dworkin used to say that. Like Andrea Dworkin was an interesting woman. And I believe that some of the ideology that's spreading around now, some of the more controversial stuff, actually kind of begins with her. She's one of the mothers of this, the more controversial stuff. But she used to say things, like all men are rapists, and she would kind of put these ideas out there, and she would push for these things. She was like one of the progenitors of the whole idea of rape culture, if you heard that. And when people would come forward and they would accuse her of hating men, she would own it, and she would say, yes, I hate men. Like, I feel like, she goes, if I could castrate every man on earth, I would do it. And she would just own that hatred. Like, she was not skittish about it. And I think that while Andrea Dworkin was alive, she was one of the things that was keeping her ideology from becoming popular at all. Because every time someone would level a complaint against her that she was sexist, that she was a misandrist, she would embrace it and say, yes, like, I want nothing good to happen to men. Like, the whole point of my ideology is to bring men down. And then she passed away in 2006. And after that, I think is about when you start to see people taking some of her ideology and trying to make it mainstream. But then, instead of embracing it as sexist, they say, no, listen, it's good for men too. And they kind of try to put that spin on it to make it seem like it didn't come from that sort of perspective. And then people were willing to accept it because, as long as you've got someone there saying, no, my ideas are horrible and I want everyone to die, I am Lady Hitler. As soon as that person was gone, it became possible to put that positive PR spin on it. So the death of Andrea Dworkin might have been a big benefit for some of these ideas spreading around. But anyway, though, I was reading one of these essays, and one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that you would see a lot of the personality and the struggle in the essays. Like, one of the ones that I remember most clearly was a woman who was writing about how she went to a conference And I can't remember what the conference was for. It wasn't explicitly for feminism. Like, she didn't go to speak to the choir. She wasn't going to preach to the choir. She was going to try to persuade, like, a bunch of men that pornography was evil. And so what she did, she explained in her essay, is that she brought, like, a bunch of snuff films and, like, torture films. And she put them up on the projector, and she was like, this is porn. And she tried to convince them that we need to outlaw porn on, like, an international level because of how heinous and terrible it was. And then she explains that after the thing, like everyone politely applauded her, and, you know, she got down from the stage. And then afterwards, she spoke to some of the people that she presented to, and she says, I spoke to a Norwegian man. And in Norway, you know, they're much more open about sexuality. Like, I remember going to Sweden, for example. I haven't been to Norway, but I went to Sweden, and like, there were, like, billboards up, like, it was like, buy our underwear, and the women featuring the underwear were topless. Like, their tits, you could just see their nipples, and I was like, oh my god, oh my god, the children, and they're like, what do the children do, Greg? And I was like, I don't know, I have no prior experience of this. I'm an American. What do the children do? And they're like, they don't do anything. It's fine. So, okay, I was mistaken. But yeah. So like, they're a lot more open about sex in, like, the Scandinavian regions and most of Europe, in fact. And so she approached him, and she's like, so what do you think of my deal? And she goes, do you think that we need to take a firm stance and stop pornography? And he laughed at her. And that's where the thing, like, she wrote about this, and she was, like, writing about how she felt. She's like, he laughed at me. And she goes, and I didn't expect him to laugh at me, because it was just such an honest, it wasn't even like he was trying to offend her. It wasn't like a derisive laugh. He just laughed, like a genuine laugh, like, in her face. And he goes, madam, I have seen a lot of porn. And he goes, what you showed us today was not pornography. He says, what you showed us today is already illegal in my country. He goes, I don't know what you're trying to stop, but it is not porn. And her essay then went on, and she was really ruffled by this, because she kind of realized what a huge gulf there was between her perspective and the perspective of the people she was trying to change. Like, she just realized that there was this massive disconnect. And instead of re-examining her views, she continued to write about how she thought that she could bridge that gap and make people think that when we discuss porn, we're explicitly discussing torture. And so she wrote this essay about, like, how we need to redefine terms and kind of make the public perception different so that language changes to make her correct. So that the next time she tells a Swedish man that porn is torture, it's already a foregone conclusion and he won't laugh at her. And there were a lot of essays that were kind of like this. It was like a weird sort of pseudo-psychology, where, like, torturing people, like, the fact that these things existed was a problem, and it was illegal for a reason, and it did need to be stopped. But it wasn't that she was trying to actively stop these violent, like, rings of like, murdering women on film, you know, like, that wasn't actually what she was trying to stop or what she was trying to do. The focus of her essay, and this was super weird, was that she was trying to be relevant and respected as an academic, and it was kind of like her own little, she was focused on her own little world. And she had identified a problem, but wasn't working towards solving the problem. She was working towards making herself legitimate. It's very strange. And a lot of the essays were kind of like this, is it was sort of about, like, they would find a problem, like a problem that might have been real, but they would kind of use it as a springboard for some other weird thing. And like I say, it was all just a matter of perspective. Like, they'd spent their entire academic lives, focusing on these subjects, and they'd become so used to thinking of, like, this is pornography, or this is my purpose, you know, that they didn't always make a lot of sense. And that's why that one stuck out with me. Because being laughed at made this woman realize that she didn't make a lot of sense. And then she was trying to figure out, how could she make sense? Like, how could she make people believe that she was sensical? And it was just interesting. It was a fascinating essay. So that was like way back, like maybe my freshman year in college or something like that I remember reading these essays. And some point later, like some 4 years later or so, when my friend graduated with a degree in women's studies and feminism, I remember getting into a discussion with her on the internet, on Facebook, over rape culture. and she accused me of being a cause of rape, and this was based on the fact that I was a man. Like, she explained to me that like, my gender made me more likely to rape, and she goes, "You probably raped someone already, Greg, and you just don't realize it." And I remember that being very offensive at the time. Like, I was deeply offended when she came forward. She just like, accused me of rape, and I disagreed, and that was what she was looking for. But she had come from this very academic perspective, and so we got in kind of a heated argument, and it got down to things. It was like I started to ask her, like, she's like, all of male culture is doing this. And I say, all of male culture. And she goes, yes, all of male culture. I said, which cultures specifically? She goes, all male cultures, like the entire world. And I said, okay, so the entire world does this. Like, this every single culture. Like, the English and the French are exactly the same. Like, and like, China and Russia are exactly the same, and Russia and the United States are exactly the same. Every single culture with men in it, exactly the same. And she goes, yes. Yeah, basically. And I said, how did that happen? And then she would be like, well, the hegemonial, patriarchal, supercalifragilistic, desertification, and she would use kind of this, she used a bunch of this pseudoscience to get on my case about all this, like, stuff that she'd come to believe. And then she went off on this tangent about, like, British colonialism. And I told her it was bunk. I told her it was bonkers. And she unfriended me. She blocked me on Facebook. And that was my first real meeting with the new wave of feminist ideology that was about to come out. This was before it became popular. I'd never experienced it before, and it was strange. But after that, I started to see a whole lot more of it. I started to see more people graduating with women's studies degrees, and more people hitting the feminist thing. And I saw a lot of things spreading on the internet, and some of them were, like, good points. Like, people would be like, video games became a very popular punching bag for this sort of thing. And so people would say, like, there should be more female characters in video games. There should be more female leaders. And when it first came out, I remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, actually, that would be pretty great. Like, I agree with that. I think, I would think about characters that I'd seen in video games that I really liked. Like, I had this game I played all the time called Ace Combat 5. I played that game to death. And I really liked Kei Nagase in it. Kei Nagase. Like, when you talk about tropes in video games, one of the things that you can talk about is there's good tropes and there's negative tropes. And one thing that they did with Kei Nagase is they gave her kind of a protective streak. And you could say this is a trope. This is like a female trope. You say, like, a protective, like a mother. Mothers protect. But Kei Nagase, she wasn't a mother in the story. She had a protective streak. Like, she was concerned about the other squad members. And this climaxes with, at one point in the game, her plane gets shot down by a SAM. It was like during a cutscene, so you couldn't do anything to stop it. But her plane gets shot down, and they do kind of a reversal of the Rescue the Princess mission, where you have to go out and you have to find her. And it turns out that when you track her down, there was also some chopper pilots that got shot down. There was a helicopter that got shot down as well on your side. And what she does is she's still in able shape enough that with nothing but a pistol, she's like running around in the snow in the forest, and these enemy soldiers are pursuing them. And she manages to actually outfox them, and while protecting these wounded chopper pilots, gets the jump on the soldiers that are chasing them, and then holds them hostage, and essentially, like, saves the day on her own. Like, and it's this heroic thing. Like, you get to the scene, and, like, when you go to pick her up, like, they do a cutscene, and she's just, like, out there in the cold in nothing but her flight suit, with a pistol, like, holding a bunch of enemy soldiers hostage, while a bunch of, like, wounded men are, like, leaning on her, and it's just sort of like this heroic, like, lionized kind of thing, and it just, like, she felt so cool. It was like, this mission was so worth it. Like, that, like, yes, like, this pilot needed to be rescued. Like, of all the pilots that we had to go and save. And throughout that whole thing, too, as you're going to rescue, like, there's the evac guys are, like, making the rescue the princess jokes. They're like, we gotta go rescue the princess, guys. And so you find the princess, and it's like, oh, right. This is, like, one of the best soldiers we have, So it was pretty cool. And so it kind of, like, I remember liking that character. Like, I like Kei Nagase. I would have loved to see more characters like Kei Nagase. Another game I played, Wild Arms 3, featured a female protagonist as the leader of your squad, of your little group that you play. And you play a group of drifters, like cowboys, essentially. And your leader is a girl named Virginia. And Virginia goes through, like, a bunch of emotional development and growth. She's a young girl, and she goes out into the wasteland with all these sort of romantic beliefs about how it's going to work and how things are. And one of her chief rivals actually becomes another woman that's out in the wasteland, kind of doing her thing, making money, working hard. And her rival hates Virginia initially because Virginia is so idealistic, and so this other girl Maya, she's just like, what are you doing? Like you need to go home. Like just get out of the game. Like don't even be in this. You're so like you are so far from pragmatic, and she just dumps on her, you know. And so Virginia, the whole development of Virginia as a character throughout the game is that she becomes more pragmatic, and she loses her ideals, but she stays passionate and convicted, and continues to lead well. Like she eventually develops into a solid leader that everyone trusts and gets behind and rallies behind. So again, like Virginia, there's good female characters. So people were coming out and they were saying this stuff about feminism, you know, like we need more female characters in games. And I was thinking like, yeah, like Virginia and Kei Nagase, and like I would love to see more characters than that. Like that. That's great. Like those are great. Like those are like, yeah, this is inspiring good characters. So for a while I was behind it. I remember I was like, yeah, we should do that. We should see more stuff like that. But gradually, I started to realize that a lot of what people were saying, it wasn't thoughtful like I thought it was. What they were doing is sometimes they were repeating by route, and this was super disappointing. They were repeating things by route, or they didn't know what they were talking about, or they were applying some kind of weird ideology, or just things like that, like things that it wasn't as good as it sounded once you got into it, and some of it was just it got to be kind of outright terrible, or just intellectually dishonest in a way. And cue Anita Sarkeesian. What the problem was is that you got people who got into the broken clock syndrome, where people would say that everything was sexist. You know, like they would say like, I want more female characters, not because they loved the female characters that were already there and they wanted to see more characters like that, but because they honestly believed that everything was sexist and that they were railing against a bad guy. And so like they got in this problem where they would say like, everything is sexist, everything is sexist, everything is sexist, and like they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. So if you're always saying that everything is sexist, like there is sexism. So, you know, at least twice a day, you would find something that was sexist and you would be right. But then, like, so many other times, you would be wrong. Like, something else would be going on. And, like, if you really looked at the situation, like, there wasn't sexism here. Like, for example, another thing that one of the discussions I got with this friend who unfriended me on Facebook was she was talking about, like, rape. And it wasn't like a thing, like, it wasn't just one conversation and she blocked me. It was actually several conversations. And initially I was trying to take her seriously. Like she was talking about how like women in rural areas have no support. And so I actually looked into this. And I was like, what do you mean they don't have any support? And I found out that there was like budgetary issues, you know, there was not a huge availability of personnel, like a rural area is not heavily populated. So like if a woman comes in and she's been raped, then it could be a while before like a specialist can show up to assist. And you know, like rape kits are not necessarily available, and there's budget problems. So there's a lot of logistical issues that go on with trying to get all these things available to people. So I remember trying to come back, and I was trying to talk about the logistics and the money with this feminist friend, and it made her angry because she didn't want to talk about the logistics or the money or anything else like this. And this is like I say, this is how I got very disillusioned with the entire thing, is because when I took it seriously and I tried to talk about like how would you achieve, like you see a problem here, like this is actually a problem that needs to be solved. And when I came and I tried to talk to her about, like, how would you solve it, she got mad. Because she didn't want to solve it. What she wanted was for me to admit that my gender was the problem, or something like that. It was like, no, it's men, it's culture, it's something, we need to change perspectives. And it was like, well, but I'm already, like, but what if I'm already on your side? And what if I think that the only way that we're going to fix this is if we, like, come up with a new way to allocate taxes, and we, like, I don't know, as soon as it got complicated, she got mad. She didn't want to talk about the complicated stuff. She didn't want to do logistics. She wanted to do, she knew which culture she wanted to blame. She knew who she wanted to feel guilt, and that's what she wanted out of me, to admit that my gender was wrong. So I saw that a lot. Broken clock, right twice a day. And sometimes even when they were right and they found a real problem, I would find that they didn't understand the problem, and they wouldn't know how to fix it, and they didn't care. You know, they would just fight for the sake of blaming somebody, and it wasn't like a positive thing. But anyway, though, Anita Sarkeesian, so she comes along, and she was kind of, in a way, like a face of this rising ideology of blame. And not necessarily, and the worst of it was blame without necessarily understanding what they were talking about. which was super weird. And I gave her videos a chance, and the reason why she fascinated me so much was because as I was watching her, like, I didn't find that there was anything special about anything she was saying. I'd had this encounter with this friend who blocked me on Facebook. I'd been seeing this online, people talking about this stuff, like, saying things but not really understanding what they were saying. And Anita Sarkeesian was doing essentially the same thing. If she was getting up there and she was just saying, this is sexist and that is sexist and this is sexist and that is sexist, and occasionally she might hit on a real problem, but she had that same problem, the broken clock problem, where she'd be right, but she was accidentally right, and she didn't necessarily seem to grasp what was right about what she was saying. Which is why you get these weird caveats when people are fair to Anita Sarkeesian, and they say, like, I agree with some of what she's saying. It's like, it's because she's right sometimes, but she's right because she would have to be some of the time. Like, you can't just accuse everything of being sexist all the time and not be occasionally correct about it. Like, sometimes you're going to be right, you're just not going to understand why you're right, because you've been doing that for everything. So she was doing that. Like, I was watching her videos, and so she was boring. She wasn't very charismatic. Like, she was not fun to watch. And she wasn't really very educational, because a lot of times she would misinterpret the context of a situation, or she would talk about something, and it would be like, if you had any familiarity at all with what she was talking about, you knew that she was, like, wrong. Like, she was mistaken. Like, I don't know. There's whole videos and essays about debunking some of the things that she's talked about. But, like, you know, as an example, like, I don't know if she's done this. It's been a while since I really watched any of her videos. But, like, if she had said, for example, like, oh, Princess Peach has never been the star of a game, or Princess Peach has never been the real protagonist, or anything like that. I mean, like, that was the damsel, like, she'd complain about the damsel in distress trope. And if you knew anything about Mario, you would know that was just flat wrong. Like, there are games where Princess Peach was actually a protagonist, where you could play as her, and she was the main character. Like, Super Mario Bros. 2 did that. Super Mario Legend of the Seven Stars. She was probably one of the best. She was a healer character, admittedly, but she was, like, the best healer character. Most people recommended you have her in the party, like, unconditionally. So, you know, like, it was like she was not well informed. And then people also accused her of doing things like taking Let's Play footage, and so she wasn't actually playing the games that she was talking about necessarily. So there was a lot of indication that she really didn't have a strong grasp of the material, and she wasn't really very charismatic. And at some point, though, because she hit this at just the right time, just as this stuff was rising and as people were sharing it around and arguing, she grew in prominence. And then got buried alive in vitriol because of this stuff. And she became, I think, like, people talk about who she is and what her intentions were. But I think it's missing the point, because it doesn't ever matter. It never mattered what Anita Sarkeesian's actual intentions were, or even if she's a con woman. Even if Anita is a genius and she's outfoxed everybody, and she's duped us all, it actually doesn't matter. It didn't matter. This is what I'm convinced of. Because people were already fighting these battles, and they were ideological, and they were on the internet with that very polar mindset, where you were either for or against something, and you were either reblogging this, or you were fighting it, or whatever. It already didn't matter. The fact that she was on the side of feminism meant that she was already a winner in the eyes of the people that were supporting feminism, and already a loser in the eyes of people who were against it. So, and like I say, this is why, like, I gave her videos a shot and found that they were super boring, and I just didn't understand, like, why she got to be so controversial at the time. But looking back on it, I can see kind of how that played out. So, she got buried alive in vitriol, and some people say that she plays up the vitriol to a greater degree to get attention, and she might. She might. I don't know if she would have to. And again, I don't know if it would matter, if it really matters one way or the other. But she promised this series, and she said she was going to do like 12 videos on tropes that depicted women negatively. And one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't like that is because Anita Sarkeesian, she's actually doing a new series that's not like this, but she was at the time always about negativity. She was always complaining that everything was bad, and like I say, she was railing on things and calling sexism on everything, just, you know, so that she would be right some of the time, but not necessarily know why. And so that negativity, I think, I've complained about it in the past, because I think that when you're very negative about things, like if you want women to be involved in a career, You do not go up in front of women who might get involved in that career and tell them that they'll never make it. You don't get out there and tell them that because of their gender or something inane like that, that they're not gonna be okay. Especially when if you can prove it false. Like for example, when you get into like STEM degrees and things like that, you find that women currently are graduating with difficult degrees. They're graduating from challenging degree programs with better grades on average than men are, and with more frequency these days than men are. Like women are actually going to start dominating these fields just by volume. So, I mean, the reality is that women are becoming more involved in the workforce, and that they're probably, and at least the way that the educational system works now, they're overtaking men. And so that's actually the real situation, is that we're kind of transitioning into women being a really major part of the workforce. And this is like a change that has occurred over the span of a single generation. We really haven't had a lot of time to adjust to it. We will, we'll have to, because that's change, and that's just what happens when, a paradigm shifts. But I feel like that's the kind of thing that you would want to promote, is you would want to get up there and say, like, women are successfully doing things, like they're getting paid well, they're getting into these careers, and here's places where they're doing really well. And you could say, like, if you're interested in this career, more and more women are doing it, and you can do it as well. Like, you could look at game designers who are women who are in the industry and who have made celebrated characters or games or things like that, who have done stuff that's really amazing. You celebrate success, and that's how you get people motivated to get into things and become a part. And anyway, though, but Anita, very negative, always talking about how women are being excluded and how women can't get in. And essentially what it boiled down to, I think, was fear-mongering a lot, is that people are afraid. When people get afraid, they share things, and I've talked about this as well. So people share fear. They tell each other about fear. And this is one of the reasons why people were sharing Anita so much, is because she made them afraid. She told them that if you were a woman, you couldn't be in the gaming industry. She said that they didn't care about women in the gaming industry. She doesn't know about Kei Nagase. She doesn't know about Virginia. She doesn't know about the female characters that I liked in games. She didn't want to see more Kei Nagase in video games because she didn't know who Kei Nagase was. Anita had no idea. So she was telling you that there were no Kei Nagases, and there were no Virginias, and that every woman in games was just an item, and that we were promoting rape culture and toxic masculinity and all these other things. She was spreading fear, and people shared her work because they were afraid, and they wanted people to know about the fear, and they wanted to be reassured, but they didn't really want to be reassured, because if they were totally reassured, then you wouldn't continue to reblog this stuff and share it, and so on and so forth. So controversy became controversy. People were sharing fear, and she was creating fear not just for women, but for men as well, because she would talk about how, like, we needed to remove toxic masculinity, and we need to cut this stuff out of games. And there are guys who really do play games because they like boobs. Like, there are entire video games that are dedicated specifically to boobs. I have seen them. The Dead or Alive series, I'm sure pretty much survives just on sex appeal. Senran Kagura, however you pronounce that, that's another game that survives entirely on boobs. And those guys absolutely didn't want to lose their favorite game just because it had boobs in it. So there was fear. She did generate fear on the other side of things, but she also generated anger from people, including myself, who really wanted to see female protagonists like Kei Nagase and Virginia, who didn't like to feel like those characters were being overlooked or belittled or to say, like, they aren't good enough or things like that, because that was what I wanted to see more of. Had Anita Sarkeesian been making videos about, like, these are these fantastic female characters, we need more of this, there's so few of them, I want to see this, like, I would have been behind her. But she wasn't. She was talking about how those women didn't exist. She was erasing them from I don't know, she just didn't give them credit at all. So anyway, she made like $150,000 on this Kickstarter to make these 12 videos. And after she earned all that money, she was originally asking for $6,000, and I think that she wasn't really taking it all that seriously. Like, I believe that she was really going for this stuff. Like, you look back and you see that when she did her, like, she had a PhD in, like, television studies or something strange like that. And her original essay was actually about video games. And in that essay, in her senior thesis, she admits that she doesn't really play a lot of video games and that she doesn't really like video games. And people, again, they cite that as proof that Anita Sarkeesian was not a gamer and is not informed. And I think it's a given that she's really not much of a gamer and that she's not super well informed. But at the same time, it demonstrates that she had passion enough and she was opinionated enough about video games that I think that she honestly did want to talk about video games, at least from her limited perspective. And she got in the middle of all this controversy and then pulled in $150,000. And I think that's when she was doomed to have to do this for the rest of her life. Because as soon as she became the figurehead for feminism, she couldn't unbecome the figurehead for feminism, and she had to forge ahead, and she had to continue doing this, because you can't just be like, if you become this incredibly controversial figure and you upset everybody, and now you're surrounded by like angry people all the time, you can't just quit and then go work at like a gas station or something like that, because then your gas station is getting like angry phone calls and people come in to like chew you out, and it creates a problem for the company. Activism is kind of a, I think sometimes if you hit it big in activism, you almost can't stop. And you see this with some activists. Like some people get so deep into it they just can never leave, and they sometimes achieve exactly what they were looking for, and then just have to keep going, because you can never really get away from it once you start. So Anita Sarkeesian pulled in $150,000 to do these videos, and then it still hasn't finished them all. And I don't know if she will finish them all. She promised like 12 videos within a year, and then did like 4 or 6 or something, and it's still like years later, multiple years later, still not actually done them. But what she has done is she's definitely made a strong living on all the controversy, and she continued to be promoted, and I think that she might be for the rest of her life. She may, like I said, she may be stuck as an activist no matter whether she likes it or not for the entire rest of her life. And I'm always curious, like, as a person, how she really feels about everything. Like, she couldn't be candid, I think. I don't think she could actually say, like, listen, I got in way over my head. I didn't really think that all this was going to happen. Or she might be able to, but she would have to do, like, but I'm still thankful for the opportunity, or I still support the cause, or whatever. But the lack of knowledge sometimes, the lack of charisma, it leads me to believe that she wasn't really cut out to be an activist. Like, she's not really a strong leader, and when or if this particular controversy becomes less popular, she really isn't going to be able to rally a base. Like, the base was already there. I think that Anita is, like I said, she's a figurehead. She wasn't really rallying people. People came to her because they were already there, and they needed a sort of unification. And so when Gamergate rolled around, Anita was there. And she was someone to rally around. She was a leader, she was a person, she was a face. And like I say, the base was already there. They were already activated. It was already being spread around. Like, people were already talking feminism. And so they just came to Anita again. And Anita made, I think, close to $500,000 in 2015. Just because of this. Like, because she continued to be Anita Sarkeesian. I think she released like maybe 1 or 2 new videos in that time, and otherwise was just going to conferences and talking about how she was being harassed on the internet, and she went on the Colbert Report. And she talked about how she was being harassed on the Colbert Report. And Stephen Colbert, like I said, people were upset with him because it was like, oh, he like, why didn't he tear into Anita Sarkeesian? And I was thinking about that afterward, like, why didn't he tear into Anita Sarkeesian? And it occurred to me that Stephen Colbert has never torn into anybody, to the best of my knowledge. I used to watch his show all the time, and I never watched him, like, really take the gloves off and, like, just beat somebody senseless in his show. Like, he had never done that. Like, he'd had people, like, real politicians, guys with platforms that may have, like, affected thousands and thousands of people, with actual, like, voting power and the ability to pass laws and to influence things. You know, people who could change the tax schema and you know, bury the poor alive and stupid debts and all kinds of other things. Like, people with real power, people with real influence. Stephen Colbert had those people on his show, and he joked with them and kind of let them promote their views, whatever it was they were doing, talk about their platform, give them the Colbert bump, as somebody once called it. Never tore into it. He never destroyed people. And so Anita Sarkeesian got in, and it was the same thing. She got up there and she was like, these are my politics and this is what I believe. And Colbert, like, he takes a few jabs, but they're always light and they're always comedic, and the person that he's talking to always bounces right back. It's fun, it's chicanerous, everybody loves it. But what I mentioned this before, and I thought it was fascinating. When he threw that little jab at Anita, and that whole thing where he's like, can games make people violent? And she goes, no. And he goes, then how do they make people misogynistic? Misogynistic. And she was flabbergasted. She was like, so the thing is, and then he had to save her. He had to kind of jump in there, and then he had to, like, make another joke so that she would... Because if he just sat there in awkward silence and, like, waited for her to come up with an answer, it would have been like, she would have just choked. Like, up there on stage, she would have said something stupid or just something really weird that would have demanded further questioning. And I got this impression that Anita maybe doesn't... She's not out there really getting a lot of feedback from people who disagree with her, that she really does try her best to avoid that stuff. It probably makes her feel unhappy. She probably doesn't like it. I really don't think... And this is why I say, like, people talk about her, she's calculating, she's a con man, she's doing all this stuff. But the con man stuff that she was involved in previously was all, like, very low level. Like, you'd have to be stupid to think that calligraphy could make a woman instantly fall in love with you. Like, there's no way that Anita looked at that and was like, yes, like, calligraphy... like everyone is going to be fooled by my calligraphy classes. In fact, I suspect that maybe Anita herself could have been a little bit, fooled by the whole thing. Like, maybe she was involved with this con man, because she wasn't in charge of this calligraphy thing. Some guy came in and was just like, yeah, calligraphy. And she was like, really, calligraphy? And he was like, yeah, calligraphy. And so she did these calligraphy classes for a while until realizing that it was trash and it wasn't really doing anything. So I don't wonder if... She's maybe not the villain that people make her out to be, and I think this because even sites that have the tendency to really rail on people, they tend not to have all that much dirt on Anita. I mean, like, they do for a lot of the people who got involved in these gender spats over the past, couple of years. But for Anita, there's really not that much factual evidence of evil in her case. She just seems to be a woman who is in the right, or if you consider it this way, the wrong place at the time, and just took off completely without her planning it. And like I say, the fact that she hasn't even completed her Tropes versus Women series tells me that she probably didn't even have a bullet list of what all 12 tropes would be. She probably assumed that there were 12 tropes and that she totally had this. I mean, like, surely there are 12 tropes that she could come up with. And then when she got $150,000 just dumped in her lap to do all 12 tropes, she got to, like, bullet point 4 and then just, like, threw her head in her hands and said, like, oh no. Like, I wasn't, oh shoot, I mean, I was expecting enough money to buy equipment. I didn't think I was going to become, like, a feminist icon. I was going to do, like, a little video series, and I thought it was going to get maybe, I don't know, like, a couple thousand views each video, and if I didn't like it, I was going to stop. That's my take on her. Like I say, other people really want to prove that she's just been terrible and malicious, but like I say, there are people who got involved in that stuff who were, but I don't think she's one of them. And the thing that's scariest, I think, for her is that she has, I suspect, very few real friends. And this is because when you get into these kinds of touchy, controversial subjects as an icon, you're trapped. If she ever backs down on it, she won't win over the people who are currently railing against her. The people who want to destroy her. She'll never win them back. She'll never be able to reach out to those people and get them on her side. Like, she could stand up today and denounce feminism and say it was all a mistake and she was wrong. And the people that hate her now will not stop hating her as a result of that. But if she did do that, the people who support her now would hate her. And so this is the thing, she can't stop. If she ever quits, if she ever goes back on any of this, then she'll be hated by both sides and she'll be buried alive. Currently, the thing that's keeping her going is the support from her side of the argument. The people who want to see more feminism and the people who want to see more of her particular message, her brand of message. And like I say, if she quits, she won't have their support. She'll have support from nobody. She'll have anger from both sides. They'll destroy her. And so that's what I mean. She has allies, but I don't think she has friends. Basically, everyone in this has a knife to her back. And some people feel that they can't be very sympathetic to that because she has earned like over $500,000 at this point from what she's been doing. But again, while the money is there, I don't believe that she's done anything particularly calculating to earn the money. I think that she's just been in the right place at the right time. And had she done this maybe 10 years prior, she would have made nothing. She would not have gained any popularity at all. Everybody would have dismissed her. And there would be nothing going on with Anita Sarkeesian. She would have to find another job, and who knows where she'd be now. Probably nowhere terrible. I mean, like I imagine, she'd find work, she'd make ends meet, whatever. But certainly she wouldn't be a major figurehead or a major icon or anything like that. Yeah. So Anita Sarkeesian, I think potentially somewhat tragic. Maybe not. I believe that she, like I say, she shuts herself off from the criticism because she wants to be happy. I assume that she's not super well informed all the time. She's not always on the ball with things. But one thing that I can say that's at least nice, I don't know if these videos are any good because, like I say, I find her boring, and I've gotten out of this controversial stuff. I've done this in retrospect because it came to my attention that she's doing a new series of videos. But to her credit, right now she's doing videos about like women in history who are supposedly fascinating or who are good, and so she's at least celebrating success, and that's good. Like, that's a step in the right direction, I think. I don't know if that's... I mean, I'm interested to see how that pans out, because, like I say, I think that fear played a very large part of her success, and she probably still has a large following. But if those videos of her celebrating success don't get like the million some odd views that her original controversial videos got, that to me will be an affirmation of kind of the entire political landscape. I mean, you can't necessarily say that I'm right about all of it, but I don't know. I feel like celebrating success is the right thing to do, but it's not the sexy thing to do. It's not the exciting thing to do. It's not the thing that's going to get like the BBC talking about what you do. It's not going to get you on the Colbert Report. Because celebrating success is the right thing to do. It's the positive thing to do, but it's not the controversial thing to do. It's not the interesting thing to do. So, people spread fear. They don't like to spread positivity quite as much. Yeah. So Anita Sarkeesian, interesting person. I don't know if anyone could ever replicate what she's done or what she's become. She's also a nonprofit, which is interesting. She's using the U.S.'s nonprofit tax laws so that all the money she makes is non-taxable. Which I mean, like once you're earning six figures, I'm pretty sure hiring an accountant and getting yourself qualified for that sort of thing is a no-brainer. But fascinating. I think it's like super easy to become a nonprofit. I believe they're very, very lax about that. But I remember that just being a thing. Like I was like, I'm one of those people I feel quite dubious about her ability as an educator. And although, like I say, these videos she's doing now, I mean, like those are historical figures. She is actually educating. If all her facts are right, I haven't watched them. But anyway, though, at least she's doing something educational now. She's trying to celebrate success now. I suspect that as she gets older, maybe she's getting tired of the vitriol. She wants to move on to something positive, which is good for her. But anyway, though, yeah, this is my thoughts. Anita Sarkeesian. I've thought about her a lot. Just fascinating person, in my opinion. Not overtly furious with her for anything. Not really very supportive of her either. But yeah, Anita Sarkeesian. So anyway, though, like I said, try to be careful. Try not to express myself in a way that would upset people or like really, I don't know. People get so passionate about this, they get so upset. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. That's my thoughts on the matter. So I suppose that'll be it for today. This is probably a long one. Yeah, we're at like almost an hour. This is kind of a long one. But thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.